morning, everybody, again. We're going to talk about pump down and recovery, and specifically focusing on how to use the new calculator on the app, because this comes up a lot whenever folks are about to do recovery. They always forget how much refrigerant you can put in a tank, and then it causes you to just sort of do the old, I think I can fit a little more in there, and that's not really the right way to do that. So to start with, I wanted to talk a little bit about pump down, because pump down is something that we used to do all the time that now we can't do all the time. So let's start there. Does anybody know the two circumstances that you can no longer do pump down effectively? Or the two reasons why pump down is difficult now? Ronnie?
Compressor replacement.
Okay, it's difficult when the compressor's not working, but that's always been true. Max? Microchannel condensers and scroll compressors. That is the correct answer. We got ourselves a regular Ken Jennings up in here. literally, Ken Jennings. Max, same person. Hey, Bert.
Hey.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm really good. I'm glad you could make it.
I was on time.
Okay. So, microchannel condensers you don't want to pump down because you can explode them. They are not designed to hold the entire refrigerant charge, whereas traditionally a condenser is designed to be a maximum of 80% full even when it has its entire system charge. So a brand new condenser that's not microchannel, you pull it out of the box, that condenser coil is only going to be 80% full. Now, one of the challenges that we also face is scroll compressors. Now, it's not so much that it's a problem to pump down scroll compressors. It is a problem to pump them down into a vacuum, which has always been. This TV is going to start playing a preview. That's good. Thank you. Thank you, TV.
Very instructive.
Yeah, that's nice. That's really nice. I wonder if there's a way to keep this from going off. Probably not. I just have to touch it every once in a while. There you go. I'll just touch it every once in a while. So it isn't so much that the issue is pumping down a scroll compressor in the sense that it's not something you should avoid doing, but you just have to recognize that once you pump them down to a certain point, they're going to stop pumping down. They're likely going to go into some form of bypass, and then you're going to lose some of your progress, and that's the problem. So does anybody have, because I don't have a rule of thumb for this, does anybody have a rule of thumb of how deep to pump down a modern scroll compressor before they start going out on bypass? If we read the Copeland bulletins, it would probably tell us. But you know, reading, am I right? Anyone? No? 10 psi, 20 psi? You've heard, Josh has heard 10 psi, probably from me, because I was probably making it up.
Because I always tell people not to go below 10 psi, but I don't really know why I made that.
Okay, so here's a thing to be careful of. When we say don't go below 10 psi, what we're not saying is that it's okay to vent what's left.
That's right.
Absolutely. That's not what we're saying. We're just saying that you can't pump down lower than that.
That's right.
So that means that in some cases you're going to have to pull a recovery tank off of your truck afterwards when you're done with that. So if you're going to do that anyway, then it doesn't necessarily matter if you pump it down to 20 psi or 30 psi or 10 psi or whatever the case may be, right? We are wanting to prevent that scroll compressor from hitting its safety where it's going to go into bypass and start to equalize, right? So that's what we're trying to prevent. I don't really care what rule of thumb you come up with. Now, let's think of some common examples here. Let's say you're going to replace an evaporator coil. That would be a really common case where you would pump down a system, or you're going to swap out a line dryer, something like that. And it's a scroll compressor or it's a microchannel. I would suggest going ahead and pumping it down, but not worrying about pumping it down nearly so far, 50, even 60 psi, and then go ahead and finish it off with your recovery tank and machine. Now, when you do that, recognize that, I forgot what I was going to say.
Not gonna be able to weigh in.
Well, okay, this is what I was going to say. That required an edit.
That's what you were gonna say.
No, this is going to require an edit here. No, it's that when you're down to that point where you're in the vapor-only phase, the vapor-only phase is a tiny amount of the overall refrigerant. As soon as you get into vapor-only phase, it's not going to make up a significant portion of your system's charge. That's what I was planning on saying before my mind went blank. I was just looking at your face, and it was so blank that the blankness just rubbed off on me. So
While we're editing, I've never had a School compressor go into bypass unless something was wrong with the compressor. What's this you're talking about? Or if it doesn't have an accumulator.
if it doesn't have
Or
an
if the head
accumulator.
pressure is so high that it.
No.
but not
No,
actually-
no, 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 no.
Not actually low.
No, 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 no. If you pump a scroll compressor down, this may be because you're always only pumping it down to 10 psi. But if you pump a scroll compressor down, many of them, and this isn't true of all of them, if you pump a scroll compressor down approaching atmospheric, eventually,
Really struggling there.
I know, it's okay though, it's fine.
Most times they'll pump out all the way.
Okay, Jesse says that most times they'll pump down all the way. I mean, I've had it happen to me on several occasions.
Unless it's slipping or it goes up, or the high pressure is so extreme, or it's
Why does it being a heat pump matter? Why does that matter?
because it's extra storage space within the.
Yeah, but, okay, so I guess I can see what you're saying is that potentially you could have a lower pressure at the,
Heat pumps do have a larger output. Hold on.
well, but it's not a matter, okay, so the reason why it does that, the reason why the scroll compressors do that, where they stop pumping at some point is because they have a, no, that's not why. It's because they have a point where it creates a separation in the scroll plates when the compression ratio gets too high. So it's a compression ratio thing. It's not a head pressure thing. I mean, there can be a head pressure thing too, like a head pressure venting, where it vents back into the, there's a word that I'm looking for here that's not coming to me. It's the morning, okay? But anyway, bypass, sure. A valve, it's a valve, right? A relief, that's the word I'm looking for. A pressure relief that goes back into the compressor crankcase. But there's also a safety nowadays that they're putting in a lot of the scrolls that prevents your compression ratio from getting too high. So as your suction pressure drops, your compression ratio continues to go up, and at some point it can go into bypass. The point being that if you can pump it down, pump it down. Don't pump any compressor into a vacuum. That's not a good practice. So pump it down to 1 psi, 2 psi, whatever. You know, just right above atmospheric. Make sense? Great. So don't try to do that on microchannel. If you're working on a scroll, then just keep in mind that that can happen if you pump it all the way down. Now, I wanted to talk about recovery tanks because we're going to be doing more recovery than we ever have before because of these reasons that we've talked about. In the past, there was a time where we would just, pump down the unit before we would change it and just send it back and, make the scrappers deal with it. That was the super old school way. Well, that's not how we do it anymore, so we're doing a lot more recovery, and it's really important that we don't overfill tanks and that we understand tank fill. Okay, we've talked about this a lot, but I want to make it really simple. That's why we've built this new tool. So, if you update the HVAC School app and you scroll down to the bottom, we have a recovery tank fill calculator. There's a couple things on here. It doesn't have every single refrigerant in the world. We just picked some of the most common ones. So we're going to go and select R410A. And then it has a maximum temperature. Now, the reason why that even has that there is because the tank itself is rated at 77 degrees Fahrenheit. So when it says WC, which is water capacity, which we're going to talk about in a second, it's rating it at 77 degrees. And so if you follow the AHRI guidelines, it's called AHRI Schedule K, they talk about everything being based on 77 degrees. 410A, R22, water, everything's based on 77 degrees. The problem is that that's not a realistic temperature that you can potentially see in the back of a van. So A lot of us use 130 degrees as sort of a reasonable maximum, and that comes from sort of the reasonable maximum that you see from the manufacturers of the refrigerants. I forget the exact term that they use, but that's where that 130 degrees comes from. It's sort of like worst case scenario. And so that's what I would generally suggest that you use. So all you have to do, pick your refrigerant, leave your max temperature where it is, and then you enter two things. And I just want to be clear where you find these. So right here, it says TW 26.1. So TW is tare weight, 26.1. And then you have water capacity, which is WC. So let's see here, water capacity is 47.7. 47.7, okay? So our total tank weight maximum is 59.54. Our total internal weight, the amount we can put into this tank maximum, is 33.44 pounds of R410A. That takes into account the 80% maximum, and it takes into account the density of R410A at 130 degrees. It's math that would be hard for you to do, because what a lot of folks will do is they'll say, well, I just take the WC and I multiply that times 0.8, and that gives me 80% fill. Well, yes, that's 80% fill if you were putting water in it, and I certainly hope you are not.
And you say full weight, total weight, meaning you're weighing the refrigerant and the tank.
And the tank, right. So when I say total weight, that is tare weight plus fill weight, which is what it says right there. So TW is tare weight, that's the empty weight of the tank. WC is water capacity. How much water to fill the entire tank? But we don't want to fill the entire tank. We want to fill it 80%, so it's 80% full, even at 130 degrees Fahrenheit.
That's 6 pounds for that tank.
I'm sorry?
That's 6 pounds for that tank. 33.
6 pounds? Where are you getting 6 pounds from?
Oh. 7 pounds.
What is he looking at? Does anybody know?
I think he's trying to do the difference between the
Oh, you're trying to take a
line
difference?
versus
No. This is how much refrigerant you can put in.
That's how much refrigerant? Or
That's how much refrigerant you can put in. 33.44 pounds of 410A.
the top is the total weight.
The top is what the total thing's going to weigh when it's all said and done.
I just can't see it from over here. Rob Grant's rubbing off of him the gray.
The color is hard to read. Yes,
hard
it
to
is.
read.
It is hard to
It
read.
needs
Yeah.
to be black.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It is. It is actually kind of, well, it's not. It's actually not hard to read on the phone, but it's a little washed out right here. Now, so let's go back. So this is important. If our trainer can't figure this out, we need to make sure that I made this in simple enough terms. So maybe we should add TW here, right? So you enter that. That's the weight of the tank empty, and you get it off the rim.
And it's also confusing because when it says tank water, it's also TW.
Okay, that is true. That is true. But on your tank it says WC.
Right.
So
you should do water capacity, parentheses.
WC. Yeah, but I think
Tar weight.
either way you're going to have to get it. It's not tar weight. That's another thing Bert likes to say all the time on videos that he makes about it. It's not. There's no tar in this tank.
Water column.
No, it's not water column either. That's the other thing that he had. It's water capacity. So when we enter this water capacity, 47.7 pounds is how much water we would have to put in to fill the tank 100%. Okay, that makes sense? So if we wanted to figure out 80% of its water capacity, we would take this and multiply that times 0.8. But the problem is we're not filling it with water, which is the whole reason why we need this chart. If we were filling it with water, we wouldn't need this chart. Now, we still might need the chart because, again, the tank water capacity is based of water density, liquid water density at 77 degrees, and I want it at 130 degrees. So it kind of makes it confusing. So there's a lot of math that's going on in behind this in order to give you this result. But the point is that when you, in fact, you know, if we wanted to get real crazy, you could write the R410A, these numbers right on the tank, because it would always remain the same if it was R410A. If it's a different refrigerant, then you'll get a different result. So if we change this to R22, now you can put more in it.
Ooh, 7 pounds more.
Yeah, significant. Because R22 is more like water in terms of its liquid density. More similar to water. Anyway, any questions about that? Pretty simple. Okay. Nowhere on the tank, nowhere on this tank does it tell you what this tank will weigh when it's completely full. That's the point. Nowhere on here, neither of these numbers include that. One tells you how much stuff can go in the tank, if that stuff is water, and if it's 77 degrees, 100% full, which we also don't want. The other number tells you how much the tank weighs when it's empty. So it's easy to know how much you got in the tank. Look at the tare weight, look at how much the tank weighs, whatever the difference is, that's how much you got in the tank. That's really simple. But what's difficult is to know how much can we put in the tank. Make sense? Cool. So we've talked about this quite a lot lately, but I always want you using a scale when you're recovering and when you're charging. And in terms of anytime you're making a major repair, I want you to weigh out the refrigerant charge in your tank. And so that means even things like if you're going to use an ice bucket, which we do a lot, especially with the smaller tanks, in order to try to keep the tank cool. Obviously, you can't weigh the ice bucket and the tank at the same time. So you have to make sure you're not going to overfill the tank while you're doing that, which means you're going to have to pull it out of the ice bucket periodically and reweigh it just to see where you stand. And that's also where this comes in handy, because that way if you forget, like, oh shoot, I forgot what I wrote down, or I forgot where you stand, you can always tell how much is in the tank. All you had to remember now is what it weighed before you started. So if anything, write that down somewhere. Any questions about that? Quick tour of the other things, because some of you may not know about this app. There's a couple tools here that will be handy to you. Some of them are pretty nerdy, but the underload capacitor test, if you ever want to do that, we've made that a lot easier to use, and it even shows.
Yeah, a little picture of it.
Yep, it shows where you connect. But all you have to do is measure your voltage across the capacitor, the amperage of the motor start winding, which would be, in a lot of cases, going to be your blue wire coming off your HERM terminal if it's a carrier. Of course, that varies. And then the capacitor rated microfarad. But another thing that we did to make it a little less likely that folks are going to mess this up is we added a message that warns you that if it's out of specification too high, that's not a sign that the capacitor is bad, that's a sign of a mismeasurement of some sort. So we're looking for, capacitors don't fail too strong. They don't fail too high of a rating. That doesn't happen. And whenever I say this, people like to point out these super weird exotic things that could happen. In reality, in the field, that does not happen. If you're measuring a capacitor that is reading a higher microfarad value than what's printed on the capacitor, it means that your measurement is wrong. And so that's what I don't want folks, because before this calculator, if you would mismeasure in some way, it would tell you, oh, it's out of range, you need to replace it. So we changed that. Now it only tells you to replace it if the measurement is too low. So if you look here at the measurements, it tells you that I have a 20 microfarad capacitor, but my calculated microfarads are 57.36. And then superheat and delta T can come in handy sometimes as well, specifically when you're working on a piston system trying to find what your superheat should be. Now keep in mind that whenever you're using a superheat calculator, you have to get your return air wet bulb temperature, which means you're going to have a psychrometer in your return air. You can't do it if you don't have that, because it can vary wildly in terms of superheat, especially in our market. Relative humidities in the returns can change a lot, and it will change your superheat a lot. So you just enter those numbers and it'll give you a reading.
Just the CFM?
What?
From 400 to 300?
No, you cannot. So at some point we may do that. It just makes the math a little bit more complicated. I haven't done that yet. So yeah. Again, we're not going to use that. We're not going to use that much. It's a high demand thing. Voltage imbalance, for anybody who ever works on three-phase, this is actually really handy. If you're ever, a normal test in three-phase should be to check your voltage across all three legs on the load side of your contactor to make sure that you don't have undue voltage imbalance. And this will tell you what your imbalance is, where it lands, because if you're over 1%, it says you should try to decrease the imbalance to get to 1%. Shows you what your motor temperature increase is, as well as what your average voltage is based on your entry. So Again, you're not going to do that too often. Nitrogen pressure. Oh, this is one that I get a question about a lot just because it's not something we do a lot. But let's say that you are pressurizing a unit when it's cold and then it warms up. So say you're working on a ductless system or something and you get the thing pressurized up and you leave it and you're doing something else for a couple hours and the temperature goes up by 10 degrees after you pressurized it. So if my pressure, oh, actually we'll do the opposite. We'll say you pressurized it in the afternoon and then it gets cold in the evening. That would be more likely. So let's say you put 350 psi in and the temperature when you added it was 85 degrees and then the temperature after it cooled down to 70 degrees. This is going to show you what your adjusted pressure will be. So before it was 350, after that temperature drop it's going to be 339.
No leak.
There's no leak. That's normal. That's what's supposed to happen.
That's 11 psi.
Right. And so the point is that temperature variation makes a big difference. Now part of the problem with this is that it doesn't just matter what the outside temperature is. So it matters the temperature of the lines running through the attic. It matters the temperature of the coil. So that all kind of averages out. So it's not quite that clear, but it does give you at least an indication that my pressure dropped. Well, could that be because there was a significant temperature drop? Or maybe my temperature went up and my pressure held, or my pressure even went up a little bit, but maybe I still have a leak. Right? So it's just something to be aware of.
I have that.
You have?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep. I was leaking and my pressure was going up. Super frustrating.
Yeah. Cool. Any questions about any of that? Again, main message today is understanding tank fill, recognizing that you can't always pump down and what to do when that's the case.
And how much does this app cost?
This app is for you today. It is free with purchase of sponsors' products. There's actually not even any ads on it. Wow. Wow, that's a good deal.
We gotta get some ads in.
We do. That's what I've been thinking. We need to get some ads. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for watching our video. If you enjoyed it and got something out of it, if you wouldn't mind hitting the thumbs up button to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notifications bell to be notified when new videos come out. HVAC School is far more than a YouTube channel. You can find out more by going to hvacrschool.com, which is our website and hub for all of our content, including tech tips, videos, podcasts, and so much more. You can also subscribe to the podcast on any podcast app of your choosing. You can also join our Facebook group if you want to weigh in on the conversation yourself. Thanks again for watching.